Hello and welcome to the 11FS Spotlight Show. My name is David Brear. In this weekly show, we shine a bit of a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industry to try and understand what is it that gets them going, growing, and what they really think the future of the industry will look like. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Alexa Guenoun, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Temenos. Lovely to meet you, Alexa. How are you doing today?
I'm good. First of all, David, thank you for having me on the show. Delighted to be here. I'm great.
No worries at all. Where in the world are you today? It's a damn sight sunnier where you are than where I am. But where in the world are you?
I'm in New York, so it's not very sunny. I guess the light helps, but I'm in New York.
Very good. Very good. I miss it very much so, I have to say, with all the lockdown and all the things I haven't been able to get over, but hopefully it won't be too much longer now. Hey, on today's show, what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about Alexa's career and taking a bit of a deep dive into how the financial services landscape is changing and evolving. It seems like every second, every day, something new is coming along. But maybe if we start, Alexa, with a little bit of if anybody's living under a rock and they don't know who Temenos is at this stage, what are you doing with your lives, guys? But if we sort of start maybe with, give us the pitch for Temenos, and then let's talk a little bit about what is it that the COO does at Temenos as well.
Okay. So as you said, if you've been under a rock and you don't know who we are the world's #1 banking software company. So that's what we do. We do banking software, nothing else. We're not a services company or anything. We're very passionate about what we do. We've been doing that for over 25 years now, and mostly about digital transformation these days. Really what makes us tick is we really want to make banking better with our community of clients and partners, but also their clients. So, we see this as a big community. If you look at us today, 1.2 billion people on the planet rely one way or another on our solutions for their banking needs. So that's a big community, you would say. What we try to do, though, is to serve them and to, as I said, making banking better for all of us. We try to combine rich functionalities in our solutions because we've been there for, as I said, over 25 years with rich technology and leading technology. We're very big into cloud. We were the first core banking in the cloud, very big into AI, and passionate, as I said, about what we do, innovation, leveraging industry standards, and pumping a lot of money in R&D.
Very good. And as you say, having that size of impact, billions of people are using your product. That's a pretty good reason to get out of bed in the morning, isn't it? But maybe if we start a little bit, what got you into this industry in the first place? You didn't leave university and become the COO of a major technology company. So give me the background. How did you get to there?
So quickly, French, born in Paris, and did my university, all my studies in France. Did a business school, which was at the time French and American, quite different from what other people would be doing, because I kind of knew right away that whatever I'll do, it'll be international. So that's really the angle of how I would say convoluted how I got here. So I started in Luxembourg, not very international, but again, not in France, in a bank. You would know actually in legal and compliance. So you see, I was an internal auditor. And then from there, got poached by a competitor of ours today that was at the time called Midas Capiti. Midas being for everybody else the muffler company, for me as well. So I didn't really know why they were coming looking for me, and started my career there. So I have to say it's through the international angle and the banking that I got into this profession. Spent about 9 years at what became Mises and then Finastra, and then joined Temenos initially through the services angle. I was in charge of our biggest client at the time. And from there, going through the ranks, going through the regions, traveling the world, and became CEO of the company, which means I drive all the operations from services, delivery, the support organization, big focus on customer success. So that's what really is getting me out of bed these days, is really making sure our customers are happy and delighted with our solution.
That's fantastic. And as you say, you've been at Temenos for a little while, and you've seen lots of different parts of Temenos. How much does that help you really manage be that chief of operations in terms of pulling all of those things together?
Well, I've done pretty much everything in the industry, I would say, except from development. Really, what I'm
Sure.
not is a developer. I'm not a coder. Nobody would trust me with a keyboard when it comes to coding a line of code. But I've done pretty much everything else from product management in my previous company to, again, services, heading delivery, managing regions, involving M&As, and across the globe. I was based in Hong Kong. I've been based in Singapore. I've been based in New York before as well. Then went back to France, then back to New York. So I think the international aspect, as well as having a complete 360 view almost of our business, from internal, but also from the eyes of our customers, because when you're in services, you're actually the advocate of your customers, gave me a very, very good view of the industry, the business, and obviously Temenos. I've been doing that for 15 years now. So that pretty much gave me a good insight on the job I'm doing today.
Fantastic. And obviously over that period, I mean, banking, financial services more broadly is changing at an absolute rate of knots, isn't it? So maybe if we step back a little bit from the just Temenos, but the industry as a whole, then I mean the world is changing faster than ever, isn't it? How do you see that sort of competitive landscape for banks evolving? Because obviously, I mean, at the beginning of my career in financial services, at the beginning of yours in financial services, banks were just competing with banks, weren't they? But obviously, in the new world with fintech, the sort of different dynamics of that competitive landscape is really dramatic, isn't it? So, how do you guys see that playing out?
Well, you exactly said it. I mean, when I started in this business, not really revealing my age, but over 20 years ago, it was about how bright your lobby was and how nice your branch was for banks, pretty much when it
Sure.
came to retail. And then, when it came to corporate, it was how many big deals were you involved in? How many big companies did you have as customers? And that was pretty much it. Money was flowing. And so that was what competition was. I mean, today, banks really are under massive pressure when it comes to cost because they have, as you say, competition now who's able to operate much nimbler, lower cost. So that's creating a huge competition that they didn't know how to deal with before. So they have to cope. Demands from customers are also changing and changing rapidly. Everybody has Netflix, everybody has Amazon, and that's what people expect now. They don't realize that it's not about buying, I don't know, the next pair of shoes or whatever, that it's about your finance. They expect the same service. So that is also not helping the banks, staying in their comfort zone. And then, of course, the regulators, they would never forget any of us, so are changing rapidly as well. So really, when you look at all of that, it's the perfect storm for change. And today, you add the little sprinkle of the pandemic, which we thought would be gone by now, but is not. So all of that is really, really transforming the industry. And the biggest transformation for me is digital and cloud. And that's
Yeah.
what I have seen accelerating at such a rapid pace over the last 2 years, I have to say. It had starting slightly really before the pandemic, but with the pandemic, it's just, I mean, really, nobody can afford not to have a state of the art digital engagement. That's not even an option. With lockdowns and everything, not having your servers in your basement is probably a blessing. So again, when it comes to infrastructure, all of these things have changed.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? We've described it a little bit like the Emperor's New Clothes. A little bit, a lot of people have turned out to be naked in the last 18 months, haven't they? When it comes to the money that they've spent trying to move themselves forwards, but I think onto that point, really, all those different pressures, as you describe, Alexa, are really leading to banks needing to face into some pretty big truths, right? And core banking and technology stacks and all of the architecture that they've got within the organizations are almost the hardest thing for these guys to really do something about. So you guys must be, I mean, all of that said, that sounds like a great opportunity for you guys, right? Because
It is.
the
It
sort
is.
of modernization journey is accelerating faster than ever as well.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that's due to, again, the demand, but also what's available to us as technology. So, I mean, you look at digital 5, 10 years ago, it was about having a decent website or eventually an app. And so you could play the lipstick on a pig kind of game. You could try to isolate your spaghetti core, all those systems you didn't really know how they were hanging together, put a nice glass in front of it, and that was enough. Today, when you need to start exploiting the data, so bring AI into the mix, when you have available at your fingertip so much automation, so much ways of accessing information and rendering it and serving your customers, obviously you're realizing that that strategy doesn't work anymore. So you have to do the hard thing, as you said. You have to go looking at your core. Now, it doesn't have to be hard. It can be through microservices. You ship at it one business line at a time, for example, one segment of customers at a time, but you cannot afford anymore to just sit there and wait. I mean, that's really what the current environment is teaching us. If you want to be on par with your competitors, if you want to be on par with those fintechs that are, again, so nimble, so agile, and born in the cloud, born with AI, then you have no choice. You have to renovate. So it is a massive opportunity for us.
Yeah, I mean that's really exciting, isn't it? It feels we talk a lot about the 11FS. It's the fabric of financial services is changing, and really that next 6 years we predict is we're going to see the greatest level of change in the industry that we've ever seen, because people have, exactly to your point, it's not an option anymore. People really have to do this to stay competitive. But I mean, you touched a little bit on the really from a consumer perspective and from a customer's angle on this as well, because there's a lot of pressures in the bank, but actually from a consumer perspective, I think people get confused with what digital really is. Because actually people are like, well, people aren't always going to want, just an internet website or a mobile website, but digital's everything, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's what we've seen, again, changing in the pandemic. There's things that people have turned to, like bill payments and things like that, which they're not going to go back on. It's the 21-90 rule, right? 21, it becomes a habit. 21 days, you form a habit. And then in 90 days, if you continue and pursue, then it's going to become your way of life. And so these kind of things, it doesn't really matter if you don't speak to somebody or you see anybody. You press a button, you pay your bills. You don't need to have to explain to somebody why you're paying your utility bills, right? Now, when it will come to mortgages and, some more engaging type of finance, I think people will still want the touch. Now, again, the digitalization is still going to be there. You're going to have to digitalize the journey. You're going to have to make it smoother. You're going to have to make application and collection of documentation faster and better and more intuitive. And all of that is still going to be there. But you will want to talk to somebody. Now, how you talk to somebody is different. Is it going to be over the phone? Is it going to be for video chat? Is it going to be for another type of platform? Or are you going to go to a branch or to a kiosk? That is what banks are figuring out. But I think eradicating completely the human touch is not going to be the option.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny, isn't it? When people talk about digital, they think it's removing all of the humanity out of the process, which is obviously humans are great. I think we can all agree that on the most part, they're all quite good. There's some weird ones, don't get me wrong, but they're great at empathy. They're great at connecting with people. They're great at resolving problems. But, if you look at somebody like an Amazon, yes, the buying experience is great, but the reason I love Amazon is the logistics. Like, they tell me 3 seconds before somebody knocks on the door that something is coming. And actually, it's that end-to-end digital experience, even if it's backed up with something in the physical world, like a chap turning up while you're recording a podcast or something, it's something along those lines. I mean, post-pandemic, like you say, the accelerant of all of these things is really heavy, right? So are you seeing any particular trends in your customers? Are you seeing any particular trends in the industry? Because, I mean, that accelerant is across the board at the moment, isn't it?
It is. And we're seeing this. Our customers are seeing it with their customers. I mean, Chase has done a survey, and across the 18, 20, and 65-year-old in the US, 80% of them have answered that prefer to manage their finance digitally. So, again, these are trends that, as I said, this is a big trend. So digital, definitely a big trend. The other thing is cloud and SaaS. So the days of building everything from scratch, even with people like us, when you would buy the software, but then potentially customize it or install it and run it, these days are gone as well. We see a big trend towards that SaaS. And there's different variation of it. Obviously, when it comes to fintech and smaller banks, it's a no-brainer. When it comes to bigger banks, the majors, they might do a certain part of their business this way. They're not yet ready to outsource everything. But we see that this is a big trend. We see that SaaS is really leading the way. And for us, it's been a big transformation, moving from the good old on-premise license where you sell a license and then you spend days to implement, to customize, from, switch on a service. So that's also a very, very big trend. And that's been possible because of cloud. For us at Temenos, it's been possible because we've been, as I said earlier, piloting cloud, I would have to say, on core banking for about 10 years now. So we are fully cloud native. We can leverage every single aspect of it, being from the deployment to the run. So that's also a very big trend. AI, not going to go away. I mean, and you mentioned the Amazon experience. Amazon for me is not only it's turning into your doorstep, it's the recommendation. You'd wonder, are they reading your mind? And they are in a way. And again, people expect that. They don't want the banner on the website that says apply for a mortgage when you just bought a house. They expect you to know. And in a way, they almost expect you to know if you didn't do the mortgage with them. People expect bankers to be magicians now. So all of that for me, it's again, it's one of the trends that also we're seeing not going away, and we're trying to infuse AI in everything we do.
Yeah.
So everywhere we can put AI, we do.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there in the data part as well, as you say, having the data to really use artificial intelligence in the right way. But it's interesting, as you say, that customers expect banks to be magicians to a certain degree, as you say, when it comes to experience and everything that comes with it. Because the challenge, I guess, is, since we've seen all of the regulatory change and real competition come into the market, it feels like the market is finally almost stacked for the customer rather than stacked for the banks. And that's an interesting challenge, isn't it? I mean, how do you think in this new world, is very much about services, it's very much about the experience. How do banks compete in that world? Because that's new to a lot of people who have been, as you say, almost the dominant forces in the markets for a decade.
Well, and you're right. I mean, banks, first of all, they have, as we said earlier, new competition. So they didn't really need to differentiate that much on their customer experience before. They were used to differentiate on product, and so you needed to speak to your bankers to finally understand what the new product was and why it was better than competition. Today, experience comes first. And that's something, that is new to banks, but it's not new to fintechs. That's what they've been thriving on. So if you look at, we've done that. We've looked at 5,000 of our retail customers to try to understand, how they make decision, and it's all based on emotion. So, again, you go to a bank, it's very difficult to reconcile emotion with banks. However, what they do have, which is part of the emotion, is trust. And so, these are the kind of things that banks have going for them, and that they can leverage, that is different from what you would see from a fintech. People love fintechs. Do they really trust them with security, for example? So that's where, they can differentiate. The other thing really is, for me, the gold mine of data. They're sitting on a gold mine. They never really realized it. And they are miles ahead. When you have 20 years of data on a single customer, no fintech can really go against us, and they don't have that. So I think that's where they're gonna try to differentiate, because if they just go at it the old way of we have better product and we can do a quarter of a point cheaper, it's probably not going to be enough.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? That battlefield, how it plays out, that dynamic of big organization, small organization. I guess the people that we're sort of missing out on that, and we touched on Amazon a little bit, is big tech. We're seeing globally, the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles of the world sort of stray in and out of financial services. Is this something that, I mean, you must have had various different conversations with some of these players. I'm sure you can't say anything, so don't break any NDAs on air now. But it must be fascinating to see that extra dynamic to the industry.
It is, and as you said, I mean, we are partners with all those big techs. So first of all, if anything, because we use that technology, I said it at the beginning, we don't do proprietary technology. One of our big strengths is relying on market standards. So we never thought we should be building our own database. I mean, there's plethora of them on the market. They're widely used and recognized, where would we go about this? We had the same approach when it came to cloud. So we have partnered with every single one of them just because we need to offer choice. We run our own SaaS on specific tech because we can't just multiply that, but our customers have the choice. So we work with all of them. We see them tippy-toeing, let's put it this way, into the financial services world rather than banking. I mean, we all heard of the payment is the easy way in, I would have to say. So every single one of them is looking into payment or doing payment. I mean, Apple Pay is one of them, Google Pay is another one. We haven't seen much more than that yet. Is it because they don't want to become regulated, really? Could be, because they enjoy a freedom today that they would not get. And that, for me, is potentially where we're going to see them forming alliances with BaaS players, banking as a service players, rather than expose themselves and get themselves regulated.
It's interesting. I mean, you touch on the BaaS thing. Maybe if we expand out on that a little bit more, because I think, as you say, the potential for that as a route to market for various different organizations, whether it's as you say, a Google or an Amazon or a tiny startup, then actually, BaaS really has exploded in the last couple of years, really, hasn't it? And it's almost because out of necessity, potentially in some regions. But how do you guys at Temenos sort of see that market shaping out? Because it is really in some senses a competitive threat, but equally the work that you guys do sits very neatly into that stack as well.
Yeah, and watch the space. There's not much I can say yet, but it is something we're looking into. And again, as you said, we're a little bit in this game like the big techs. We will not become ourselves a regulated entity. We will not become a competitor to our own customers. It's going to be very difficult to do that for us. However, can we be the technology underpinning for those BaaS initiatives? Of course we can. How much can we do? Can we do just the technology? Can we provide some of the SaaS services that sit under this BaaS? These are the things we are looking at, exploring, and working very hard on, because, as you said, it's an easy route to a market where, if you have to go and apply for a banking license, I mean, look at Varo, right? Varo is a great example for us. They're not a BaaS. They're, as you probably know, the first new charter issued for a fintech, a national charter, right? So it was big news. But they did take some time, not about implementing our technology, but, doing all the regulatory rounds around to be able to get that license and operate as a bank. They had the customer base because they came from, a partnership with another bank. They had bankers at the helm, which is different from many other fintechs. So they could, really do that. Now, whether everybody else can do it is different, or want to do it, or want to spend the time and the years entertaining the regulators to get that charter is a different discussion. So the BaaS route is really, really good. And for us,
it's fascinating on that. Sorry to cut across you, Alexa. It's fascinating on that, just because your point there. I mean, you were saying about, well, where's the future for big banks? But with the big banks, that might be the excuse for them to really revolutionize their technology stack and play that part in the market. Because, we've seen, mobile banking in, 2010 or whenever it was, is revolutionized how banks thought about APIs. Yep. Potentially, BaaS as a, service for a HSBC or a Citi or whoever, that might be the reason that they really revolutionize their stack and move into being those BaaS players. So that's a growth area finally, potentially for big banking organizations. Hey?
And they are already banks who are providing BaaS services. And so, it's chicken and egg here. Whether they renovated and figured out that they could then leverage this and service other institution and make money out of it, or whether, they did that for that purpose to start with, bigger banks are on that journey. And, it's a new revenue stream. It's a way to diversify. They can apply that to their own banking by creating a new brand. So, there's different options for them.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I really feel like I say this to a lot of people. Can you imagine being in banking like 50 years ago? It would have been really boring, wouldn't it? But actually, with the amazing amounts of things that are coming to the market and the change in the industry, and we really are working in financial services at the best time. Hey,
it is, and again, it is very interesting for me to see the new players Because again, spent 25 years of my career talking to banks, right? So that's pretty much, I'm not going to say more of the same, but it is very, very much, uh, as I said, what differentiates them, the color, the size of their lobby, how much they would charge, on a certain product. This has really changed. And for me, seeing all these new players, it's also the dynamics there, the pace, the risk taking. You wouldn't associate banks with risk taking, but fintechs do take risk. We see that in their attitude to their projects when they want to launch something, how much they would tolerate that it's not 100% perfect. Banks want 110% perfect. So it's going to change completely the industry and the approach. And it is, as you said, exciting to be in this time in this business.
So I guess one thing to sort of touch on, we touched on cloud a little bit, but I mean, when a lot of organizations that we talk about clouds, they think about just replacing a data center, which is obviously missing probably 99% of the benefit of really what cloud can do. But have you got any sort of tangible examples where you guys are working with people where it's a lot more than the just where our data center is not going to be anymore?
Yeah, I think I could think about, probably the best usage we've seen on cloud and SaaS technology is PayPal. I mean, we've been launching, it's been a lot of noise. I mean, they have launched on our technology their buy now, pay later product. I mean, their CEO deemed this as their biggest and fastest launch. They even mentioned that after 6 months, 70% of their customers were reusing this. So in terms of volume, it's been massive. We've been processing over 10 million application for loans for these, buy now, pay later loans.
Wow.
And we've been launching for now, let me count. We're down to 5 geographies. There's 2 more coming that I cannot mention, but PayPal has launched and that's official. So, it's obviously in the US for buy now, pay later, France, the UK, Germany, and Australia. And all of that with us, I have to say, almost with us not doing anything, which is great. We provision as they need. They launch the service. They're able to launch countries in less than 3 months. So, I don't think they would have been able to do that if they had to stand up technology in every single country, if they didn't have a platform that was catering for regulation in different jurisdiction, and if we couldn't frankly cope with the volume, not only from the architecture standpoint, but also from the technology standpoint of our application, because it's, quite a large volume. When you're sitting
Yeah.
there on Black Friday and wondering, is this going to hold? You realize, actually, not too bad.
It's amazing, isn't it? Cloud is a web scale technology within a banking stack. It's interesting. Do you think that players like PayPal and obviously fintechs are sort of born into the cloud era as well? I mean, do you think this is even more pressure for big incumbent organizations to really join the cloud revolution? Because as you say, the operational benefits, the cost benefits, there's so many different reasons to do it. And actually, I mean, many regulators globally now, as you say, are really, pro cloud in terms of the ways in which data is being stored and all of the security really that sort of comes around it. So it feels like it's at a tipping point, doesn't it?
It is, and you're right with the regulators. 5 years ago, we all had, a request for information, RFPs, RFIs about solutions, and there was this odd questions: could you run in the cloud? And the reason why it was an odd questions, was really the regulators perceiving this as too risky. Today, PayPal came to us. There was no other option. They didn't come and said, "Oh, what if we wanted to run this ourselves?" In a box in our basement. It had to be cloud or not. And why? Because they knew that they wouldn't have issues with regulation. So, in that sense, we talk about regulators being difficult and putting barriers around the sector. Actually, in this one, they're really helping because they are now
Yeah.
in pretty much every jurisdiction saying, "Yeah, go for it."
Definitely, it is amazing times again, and I think we could probably unpack each one of those slices for another hour in themselves. But we're definitely going to be coming to the end of the show now. But we always like to ask a little bit of advice to yourself. Really, I mean, what would be the advice you'd give to your younger self? Because I mean, you've had an amazing career. I know there's a hell of a lot more to go in terms of what you want to achieve. But what would be the thing that you would say to your younger self to give you a bit of a pep talk?
Don't know if it's a pep talk. One advice, I came from, a generic MBA type of studies. So, very much geared toward business, very much geared towards finance, and probably not enough geared towards tech. So probably I would have advised myself to spend more time getting more acquainted with technology, as in hardcore technology. That's not what I do today, but obviously having a better understanding of the technology around you for me is something that I would probably advise myself. It's not something I was so interested in. It's interesting now that I work in this field, right? But it's not something. So I think that's one of the things. The other thing is, when people tell you, "Oh, you're in banking, you're in software, it's boring." It is not. So you know what? That's also the one thing, and it's even less. I would have to say today. And as I mentioned, the fintechs. I today speak to people who are from Google, from Amazon, from Facebook. These are the bankers of tomorrow. These are the banking institution, let's put it this way, of tomorrow. Whether they're called banks or not, it doesn't matter. So, just to give you a bit of an insight, I have a sister who's in advertising, and obviously it's always been about trends. And, she's been going to work in sneakers for the last 20 years, right? And we're catching up now. So, I think this misconception about how trendy this industry is probably also something that I would have a pep talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to be a banker at this stage, isn't it? For sure.
Exactly.
I remember in I think it was 2008 where I think we stopped telling taxi drivers what we did for a job, didn't we? I think I said to everybody I worked in IT at that point, but I'm proud to be a banker again, which is good. But or at least proud to be working in financial services. So
yeah.
And just before we finish off, then, what's next for Temenos? Because there's the industry is shifting, as you say, and you guys are shifting with it in terms of the things that you're doing. So, can you give us a bit of a foreshadowing on what's coming next for you guys?
We just announced the Temenos banking clouds, with full on SaaS. So really, expect to see more and more of this. Launching more services, around different line of business. Launching more offerings for different type of financial institutions. Let's not call them bank for a minute. I think that's really where we're going. Clearly, we will always have, the licensed business, just because the bigger institution might run in the clouds, but themselves, and so buy a license and run it. So this is always going to be there. But I think where we see the industry shifting, and so we are actively engaged in this, is in the SaaS movement. So announcements came in, and you can expect more of that. I mentioned BaaS, unavoidable. This is something we're going to have to address one way or another. Don't expect Temenos to become a bank tomorrow. That's not the intent. But again, in that field, we will have to be present. So I think this is the big, anything around this, and which will in turn obviously change our revenue profile, more recurring revenue. So that's where we're going.
Fantastic. Well, it's going to be, it's been a hell of a journey so far. It's going to be an amazing journey, I think, over the next 5 to 10 as well, which is fantastic. A lot of fun to be had, which is great. Sadly, we're coming to the end of the show, though. Alexa, where can people learn a little bit more about you and all the great work that you guys are doing at Temenos?
Obviously, go through the website just to know the institutional bio, who I am. Our LinkedIn, publishing quite a few articles. I've been publishing and being interviewed, so there's a lot of things there. I try to post. And then, shows like yours, obviously. So I guess we'll have a great viewership there.
Very good. And from Temenos' perspective, is it www.temenos.com? Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Very good. Right. Well, I'm sure all the announcements, there'll be lots and lots of more content as it comes out as well. But Alexa, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. All right, that's all we have time for this week, I'm afraid. Make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn, Twitter, pretty much every social media channel at this stage. And if you want to catch up on any of the other shows that we've been doing, just type 11FS into YouTube. You'll get all of the previous episodes. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you have a great week. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.